She stood alone on the church steps, the echo of wedding bells replaced by silence. Her white dress, once a symbol of hope, clung damp and dirty to her legs as rain began to fall. In her trembling hand, the bouquet drooped, forgotten. From inside, the chapel, laughter and footsteps faded. His family had already driven off. They'd said it wasn't personal. He needs a real wife, one who can give him children, but it felt personal. Deeply. She didn't cry, not then. Not until two small voices pierced the cold. "Are you a princess?" one little girl asked, her wide eyes staring at the veil. Her brother, a few years older, held a toy sword and stood protectively in front of his sister. "You're bleeding," he said quietly, pointing to where a shard of glass had sliced her palm. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came, just a slow, collapsing breath. That's when their father appeared. A tall man in work boots and a tired flannel shirt, eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. One abandoned bride, two curious children, and a decision that would change all their lives. Tell us where you're watching from before we ride into this twisted tale, and subscribe if you love the West. Dust clung to everything in Weller Creek. It coated porch swings and window panes, curled around horses' hooves, and turned even the cleanest laundry a shade of tired. The kind of town where time didn't move forward. It just settled, layer by layer, like the red grit on the soles of your boots. Mary Beth Lane had lived in Weller Creek all her life, but it never truly felt like home. People remembered her mother's sweet voice and her father's steady hands at the blacksmith's forge, but they didn't know what to do with Mary Beth herself, not since the accident, not since she came back wrong. She walked with a limp now, barely. Noticeable if you weren't watching, but in a town this small, everyone was watching. Her right leg had been crushed in the same fire that took her family's house, and her ability to bear children. Whispers filled the air long after the flames. "We're gone. She's a jinx. Pretty face but broken parts. Can't give no man a future, not like that." Mary Beth heard it all, even if no one said it to her directly. The words hung in shop doorways and behind closed curtains. The women smiled too sweetly. The men looked too long, then looked away. She might as well have been a ghost trailing through town in her long skirts and silence. She worked at the library, one of the few places where quiet wasn't suspicious. Every day, she shelved books and ran her fingers over embossed titles she couldn't afford to buy. Stories were her only company, and even they sometimes felt hollow. At night, she returned to her aunt's rundown farmhouse on the edge of town. The old woman had died 2 winters ago, leaving Mary Beth the place out of pity or perhaps obligation. It creaked and moaned in the wind, but it stood, and that was more than most things in Mary Beth's life. She had no friends, not real ones. Church ladies brought her leftovers on holidays. The town doctor gave her discounted pain pills and wouldn't meet her eyes. Even Pastor Finch, who had once suggested she help with the Sunday school class, had stopped asking after. His wife had politely reminded him of Mary Beth's condition, infertile. It wasn't a dirty word, but it was a death sentence in Weller Creek. Here, women were measured by their potential to make a family, to grow a legacy. Mary Beth had none to offer, and so she drifted, seen but unseen, always on the periphery. Then came Joseph. He was new to town, a widower, they said, moved in with 2 young children and too much sorrow behind his eyes. He bought the old Mendez ranch and worked it alone, save for a few seasonal hands and his kids, who trailed him like ducklings, muddy and curious, full of questions the town didn't have time to answer. People pitied him, the way they did all men who lost wives early. But they didn't shun him. No one whispered about his past. No one called him broken. Mary Beth saw him first at the general store, his arms full of canned beans and a toddler tugging at his pant leg. He had a quiet kind of tired about him, the kind that wasn't loud but undeniable, like worn leather or fraying rope. Their eyes met once and he nodded. She nodded back. That was it. But then his daughter wandered into the library the next week, sticky-fingered and wide-eyed, asking for books with horses, but no dying in them. Mary Beth led her to the children's section, her limp clicking faintly against the tile. The girl didn't seem to notice. Neither did the boy, who showed up the week after, asking if dragons were real, and if he could borrow 5 books, even though the sign said 3. They came often after that, always alone at first. Joseph arrived eventually, wary but polite. He kept his distance. Mary Beth didn't mind. She was used to that, but the children weren't. They drew close, like shadows in search of warmth. One day the girl touched the hem of Mary Beth's dress and asked, "Why do you walk funny?" Mary Beth paused. "Because I got hurt a long time ago." "Oh," the girl said, as if that were perfectly reasonable. "My mom died. That hurt too." They looked at each other then, 2 souls scarred by different kinds of fire. And something passed between them. Not pity, something quieter. Recognition. Still, the town talked. They noticed Joseph's children smiling more. They noticed Mary Beth laughing, softly but laughing. They noticed how often she walked the road toward the ranch, and they didn't like it. She's got no right to play house. He don't know what she is. Poor man's been fooled by a pretty face and bad luck. Mary Beth heard it all, but by then it didn't matter quite as much. There was a garden blooming behind the farmhouse now, planted with tiny hands and watered with joy. There were drawings on her kitchen walls and muddy boots by her door. The silence in her world was beginning to fill, but the real shift didn't come until the day of the wedding. Her wedding. And the church doors slammed shut behind her. The wind in Weller Creek had a way of changing without notice. It wasn't sudden or sharp, just a shift in pressure, a subtle turn in the air that made curtains stir and animals glance up as if remembering something long buried. That's how Joseph Hale came into Mary Beth's life. Not as a storm, but as a whisper of something different, something dangerous. She first noticed him not in a grand moment, but in the way he lingered just a second longer at the library counter when the children checked out their books. His fingers brushed the spine of a novel she was shelving, Hemingway, she thought, and he said, "You read much?" "Only what's worth reading twice," she answered, not looking up. He chuckled once. That narrows it down. They didn't talk much that day, nor the next time, or the one after that. But something changed. He started showing up without the children. Not always, just sometimes, early in the morning when the library had barely opened, or late in the afternoon when shadows stretched long across the floor. He'd browse without taking anything, like a man pretending to look while waiting for something else entirely. And Mary Beth noticed. She pretended not to, but she did. He had a way of leaning when he spoke, like he didn't want to take up too much space. His voice was low, but not secretive, and he looked at her, really looked, without skimming past her limp, or her hand when it trembled from old pain. He didn't flinch when she dropped a stack of books, or wince when she struggled to open the stiff latch on the front window. One afternoon, as she was straightening the returns card, she caught him reading an old copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. He held it like it was made of something fragile. His thumb traced the edge of a page he'd dog-eared. "That one worth reading twice?" he asked. She raised an eyebrow. 3 times at least. He smiled, soft and tired. "I used to read it to my wife, back before the kids were born. She'd always fall asleep halfway through and I'd just keep reading out loud like she was listening." Mary Beth didn't know what to say to that. She just nodded, and that somehow was enough. The town, of course, began to notice. Mrs. Laverne from the bakery caught sight of them walking the same direction one afternoon. Mary Beth with her worn canvas tote, Joseph with a bag of apples slung over his shoulder. They didn't touch, didn't speak, but they moved like 2 pieces of a puzzle slowly finding their place. By the next morning, whispers curled like smoke through Weller Creek. "She's setting her hooks in. He's too lonely to see straight." Poor children, that woman's cursed. The worst came from Pastor Finch's wife, who cornered Joseph after Sunday service and offered him a casserole and a warning. "Your children are such a light," she said, smiling wide. It would be such a shame for them to be around someone with so much sadness in her spirit. He didn't answer, just took the dish, nodded politely, and walked away. The next Sunday, he didn't come to church at all. One evening, Mary Beth was closing up the library when she saw him waiting outside. "Thought I'd walk you home," he said. "If you don't mind." "I can manage," she replied, her voice cool, automatic. "I know you can," he said gently. "I just wanted to." She hesitated, then nodded. They walked in silence, the gravel crunching beneath their feet. The air smelled of creosote and far-off rain, though the sky was clear. The town faded behind them in shades of orange and rust, and the field stretched wide and lonesome on either side. Halfway down the old Miller path, she finally asked, "Why? Why what? Why me?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Because you don't flinch when things get quiet. Because you look people in the eye, even when they don't deserve it. Because my kids come home talking about books and dragons, and someone who listens to them." She stopped walking. "That's not enough for most people around here." "I'm not most people." She looked at him then. Really looked. And she saw it. The grief still coiled in his chest like barbed wire. The years of holding things together, with rough hands and too little sleep. But beneath it, there was something else. Not pity. Not charity. Hope. And that terrified her more than anything. A week later, someone left a note on her door. A single sheet, folded once. No name. Just 5 words. "He deserves better than you." She burned it without reading it twice. But it stayed with her. That night she sat at the kitchen table long after the lights were out, staring at the cold tea in her mug. Outside, the wind was rising. It rattled the window frames and whistled through the cracks in the porch boards. The same wind that had once carried fire across her childhood home. The same wind that had left her broken. She thought of Joseph's hands. Strong, calloused, always gentle. Of the children's laughter, echoing in the empty rooms of her house. Of the way she had started smiling again without meaning to. She thought of losing it all, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself cry. The next morning, she found a bundle on her porch, wrapped in a red scarf, slightly frayed at the edges. Inside were 2 books, a children's adventure and a dog-eared romance, and a note written in blocky, careful letters. "You read to us sometime?" Ellie and Sam. She pressed the note to her chest and closed her eyes. The wind had shifted again. Later that week, Joseph returned to the library as dusk settled over the town. He found her shelving books, humming softly to herself. "You've been quiet," he said. "Thought maybe I'd said too much." "You didn't say enough." She turned toward him. He took a step closer. "I don't want what this town thinks I should want," he said. "I just want something real." She looked down at her hands. "Real things break." He reached out, gently lifting her chin. "Then we'll build it back. Together." Outside, the wind whispered through the branches of the old maple tree, and for the first time, Mary Beth didn't feel the need to run. The church bells never rang. Mary Beth stood in the vestibule, her veil trembling in her hands, the lace crumpling with every breath. Outside, the pews sat full of curious eyes and silent mouths. Whispers snaked through the wooden beams and over the pressed suits and Sunday dresses. She waited. Joseph wasn't late. He wasn't coming. At first, she thought it was a mistake. He'd gotten turned around on the back roads. One of the kids had fallen. Something, anything, had kept him from walking through those carved oak doors and taking her hand. But then his brother stepped inside. A man Mary Beth had only met once, briefly, who now refused to meet her eyes as he muttered, "He's gone." Took the children, said it wasn't right. The words didn't make sense. They bounced around inside her skull like stray bullets. "Gone?" she asked. "Gone where?" He left a note with the pastor. Said he couldn't marry someone like you, that he had to do what's best for his family. The room tilted. Someone caught her elbow, but she yanked away. "I need to see him. He's gone, Mary Beth. I'm sorry." She ran. Down the church steps into the street. People called after her, but she didn't hear them. The veil slipped from her hair and floated onto the dirt road. Her skirt snagged on a nail in the fence post and tore halfway up her thigh, but she didn't stop, didn't care. She ran until her lungs burned, until her leg, her ruined leg, gave out beneath her. She collapsed in the dry brush past the edge of town, dust clouding around her like smoke. She stayed there, face down in the weeds for what felt like hours. The sun slid lower in the sky, dragging shadows with it. Her fingers clutched the earth as if it might hold her together. She had believed him. Joseph. She had let herself believe she was worth something again, that she could be a mother in her own way, a wife, a woman who was not just a scar and a limp and a silence people crossed the street to avoid, and in the end he had chosen them, their voices, their warnings. He deserves better than you. She didn't cry. Not yet. Her body was too numb. She just lay there in the dry grass, her white dress turning brown with dust, the torn lace fluttering like the broken wing of a bird. It was nearly dark when she heard the footsteps. Slow. Careful. She didn't move. "Mary Beth," came a quiet voice, not hurried, not panicked. She said nothing. The steps grew closer. Then a pause. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear to God I didn't know they were doing this." She rolled over slowly, forcing herself onto an elbow. Her hair stuck to her cheeks and her dress was a ruin. Joseph stood 5 feet away, holding his hat in his hands like a man who didn't deserve to wear it. "What happened?" Her voice was hoarse. He looked down. "They threatened me." "Who?" "My brother. The pastor. Even some of the town council. Said if I married you, they'd push me out. Take my land. Said my kids would suffer. So you left me." "I didn't leave you. His hands clenched around the brim of his hat. "I didn't know what to do. I took the kids and I drove. I didn't mean to go far, just think." She sat up straighter. "You took the children." He nodded. "They were crying, asking for you. Ellie had drawn you a picture. Sam kept saying we should go back, that you were probably scared." Something broke in her then, not like glass or bone, more like ice finally cracking under the weight of spring. "You didn't trust me enough to tell me," his voice caught. "I didn't trust myself." Silence stretched between them. "I thought I was past this," she whispered. "I thought I could finally breathe again. I never meant to hurt you." Mary Beth stood, slowly, her legs stiff, beneath her. "Meaning doesn't fix it?" "I know." The wind stirred again, carrying the cold scent of the coming night. Joseph stepped forward and held out a bundle wrapped in a red scarf. "Ellie made you tea," he said. "It's probably cold now, but she made me promise." Mary Beth took it, though her hands shook. She didn't open it, just held it against her chest. "I don't want saving," she said. "I'm not here to save you." "Then why are you here?" He looked at her with tired, open eyes. "Because I was wrong. Because I let fear make choices for me. And I never want to do that again. I didn't come back for a wedding, I came back for you. However you'll have me." She turned from him and looked out over the hills. Dusk was swallowing the world, slow and patient. Somewhere, a coyote called. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said. "Then I'll earn it," he said. "Every day. If it takes 10 years, I'll wait." They walked back to town together, not touching, not talking much, just walking. And somewhere in the quiet between their footsteps, something unbroken began to stir. The town noticed her return. Her dress was filthy, her hair tangled, her face pale as ash. But she walked upright, eyes forward, back to the farmhouse she had almost left behind forever. No one asked where she'd been, no one dared. But Joseph came, day after day. He brought the children. They didn't talk about the wedding. He didn't ask to stay. He just helped. He fixed the front step that had creaked for years. He fed the hens when her leg was too stiff to bend. He sat on the porch in the evenings and read aloud while the children lay in the grass and stared at the stars. And she watched. She waited. Slowly, the frost between them began to thaw. One night, weeks after the broken church day, she brought out, a pot of stew and set it between them on the porch swing. "No one's ever waited for me before," she said. "I'll wait as long as it takes." She looked at him then, not the man she had once imagined standing at the altar, but the man who had stood in the dirt with her when she had nothing left, the man who didn't offer promises, only presence. She passed him a bowl of stew, and when his fingers brushed hers, she didn't pull away. Winter left slow that year. Clumps of snow clung to the shade like stubborn regrets, and the ground took its time softening. But Mary Beth rose earlier each day, pulling open the curtains on a world that no longer turned its back on her. Joseph and the children had moved in. Not all at once, not with fanfare, but piece by piece. First came the boots, on the porch, then a stack of books beside her kettle. Then one morning, she awoke to the scent of eggs and coffee and Ellie's soft singing in the kitchen. The house didn't feel like hers anymore. It felt like theirs, and that terrified her. They rebuilt the barn first. A storm years ago had twisted the rafters and blown out the east wall, and since then it had leaned like an old man, too proud to fall. But Joseph saw use in it, potential. He drew up plans with quiet confidence, measured wood with Sam perched on his shoulders, and handed Mary Beth the hammer like she'd always known how to swing it. At first, she hesitated. "I've never done this," she said. "So?" he replied, eyes twinkling. "Neither has the barn." By spring, the beams stood straight again. A new roof held firm beneath the stars, and Mary Beth had splinters in her hands and strength in her shoulders she hadn't known she could reclaim. They worked side by side, sweat soaking their shirts, laughter softening the hard lines in their faces. The town watched from a distance. No one helped, but no one interfered either. Something in Mary Beth's spine warned them off, some ember of defiance finally catching wind again. One night, as a storm boiled on the horizon and the wind pulled smoke sideways from the chimney, Mary Beth sat beside the fire, Ellie curled against her side. Joseph stirred a stew in the kitchen, humming a song she didn't know but found she liked. "You're smiling," he said over his shoulder. "Am I?" "Like someone who knows where they belong." She looked down at Ellie's sleeping face and brushed a curl from the girl's brow. "I'm still learning." That night, Joseph didn't go back to his own room. He stayed beside her in the quiet, their fingers brushing like leaves meeting on the same stream. She didn't speak. Neither did he. But when the thunder cracked and the wind beat against the windows, they faced it together. Then came Sheriff Darnell, a man carved from old law and older grudges. He rode up to the ranch one morning with a thin smile and a paper folded in his coat pocket. "Afternoon, Miss Carter. Hail." Mary Beth nodded slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. "Something I can help you with, Sheriff?" "Maybe." He dismounted with the lazy menace of a man used to delivering bad news. "Seems there's a lien on this land, from your late father's debts, old records, dusty ones, but real." Joseph stepped onto the porch behind her, jaw tight. "We've been fixing this place up for months. No one said a word." "Well," the sheriff said, unfolding the paper, "guess the wind finally changed. If the debt's not paid in full, they'll reclaim the property come summer." Mary Beth didn't blink. And where was this before? He tucked the paper into her hand. "Same place everything hides in this town, waiting until you get too happy." The next few weeks passed in hard silence and harder work. Joseph offered to sell his land. Mary Beth refused. "It's your children's home," she said, "and this is yours." They argued for the first time, real rough-edged words in the dark, but neither left. Neither turned their back. Instead, they gathered their strength. Mary Beth sold the old family jewelry buried beneath floorboards. Joseph took up extra work hauling lumber out near Stone Creek. The children pitched in, planting garden rows, gathering eggs, selling pies Mary Beth made from scratch at the town market. And the town noticed. Not all came around. Some turned their eyes and held their tongues, but others quietly, awkwardly offered help. A plank of wood left by the barn, a bag of flour, a coin in the jar when no one was looking. Still, it wasn't enough. One night, as the fire snapped low and her hands ached from kneading dough until midnight, Joseph found Mary Beth on the porch, staring into the dark. "I'm tired," she said. "I know. I don't want to lose this." "You won't." She turned toward him then, firelight catching the wet in her eyes. "You left me once, and I forgave you. But if you leave again, I won't survive it." He came close, resting a hand gently on hers. "Then let me promise you something." She waited. "I can't fix what the world breaks, but I'll break with you if I have to. I'll stay in the ash, rebuild in the mud, carry whatever this life hands us. Not because I'm a hero, just because I want to. With you." And then he knelt. No ring, no plan. Just calloused hands, honest eyes, and a man kneeling in the dust before the woman who made him whole again. She didn't say yes. She didn't have to. But peace is never permanent in a town like Weller Creek. 3 weeks. Before the debt was due, Mary Beth received a letter, a red wax seal, the handwriting tight and unmistakable, her mother's. She hadn't spoken to her since the accident, since the fire took the barn, her father, and her future all in one cruel breath. Inside the envelope was a deed, not to her land, but to hers and Joseph's, signed, legal, stamped, and a note. Use it. Or disappear, but don't ever come back. Mary Beth sat by the fire that night, the paper heavy in her lap. She could erase the debt. The ranch would be hers, truly hers. But it would mean accepting the help of a family that had cast her out, branding her with shame, fear, and silence for years. She hadn't cried when the sheriff came. But now, she wept. Joseph found her there. He didn't ask, just knelt beside her and read the note. When he finished, he looked at her quiet and steady. "What do you want to do?" She looked down at the flames. "I want to be free. Then we burn it." She hesitated. "Are you sure?" He took her hand and held it over the fire. Together they fed the deed to the flames, and as the fire swallowed the last mark of her past, Mary Beth let go of the girl she had been, the girl who flinched, who apologized, who waited to be rescued. In her place stood a woman who had survived. The next day, they rode into town, together. She walked straight to the bank and placed every coin, every dollar, every bit of their scrape together, pride on the counter. "It's not enough," the banker said. Joseph stepped beside her and placed a worn envelope beside hers, his savings, and behind them came others. Quiet folk, older folk, even a few who once crossed the street to avoid her. Coins, IOUs, a jar of buttons someone claimed was silver-backed. It still wasn't enough until Sam stepped forward. "My daddy says a man is only as strong as the people who stand behind him," he said, voice high and shaking. "So here we are." The banker looked down at the pile of uneven offerings and for once said nothing. Then he nodded. That night, Joseph and Mary Beth stood beneath the barn's new roof, fire crackling inside, the stars wide overhead. The land was theirs now. The fight was far from over, but they had made it this far, together. She looked at him, her voice low. "You still want to marry me?" He smiled. I never stopped, and this time when they kissed, no bells needed to ring. The fire had returned. The invitation came pinned to the door with a blue ribbon, hand-lettered. "Careful. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Mary Beth Carter and Joseph Hale. All are welcome. No church this time. No bells, no pews, no pastor murmuring warnings behind her back. Just a clearing by the rebuilt barn, lanterns strung like low-hanging stars, and hay bales covered in cotton sheets. The wildflowers hadn't bloomed yet, but Ellie had painted some and placed them in jars anyway, and when the day came, the whole town came with it, not in celebration, not all at once, but in curiosity, in silence, in penance. Some came out of guilt, others came out of grace, but they came. Mary Beth stood at the edge of the clearing, the wind curling through her skirt, her old wedding dress repurposed with blue stitching and patches sewn by Ellie's small hands. Her scar was uncovered. Her limp visible, her smile unhidden. She had nothing left to hide. Joseph waited beside the oak tree, his hand resting on Sam's shoulder, his face turned up toward her like he was still stunned by the sight of her. There was no music, just the hush of wind and the heartbeat in her ears. She walked slowly, not to hide her limp but to honor it. Every step a declaration. This is who I am. This is what I've survived. When she reached him, she took his hand without a word. There was no pastor, no priest, just Joseph's voice, steady and clear. I don't promise easy, he said, looking only at her. But I promise real. I promise to stay when the storm comes, to kneel when you fall, to hold the silence when you need it, to never leave again. Mary Beth's voice shook only once. I don't promise to forget, she said, but I promise to forgive. I promise to speak, even when I'm afraid. I promise to build, not for you, but with you. They kissed under the open sky, and someone in the crowd clapped. Then another, and then everyone stood. Some cried. Even Sheriff Darnell took off his hat. The party was simple. Hot cider, biscuits, laughter. Sam showed off a wooden horse he carved himself. Ellie danced barefoot under the lanterns. Mary Beth sat on the porch steps, her boots in the dirt, watching it all with a quiet awe. Joseph joined her, 2 mugs in hand. I was going to ask what you're thinking, he said, handing her one. But I think I know, she sipped slowly. I used to think I was cursed. You're not. I know that now. They didn't say much more. Words weren't always needed anymore. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the lanterns swayed low and sleepy in the dark, Joseph came back from the barn with something wrapped in a blanket. I've been working on this, he said. Didn't want to show you till it was done. Inside was a carved sign, smooth and strong, painted in careful black letters. The Carter Hale Ranch. She ran her fingers over the grooves, over her name, bold and whole and included. I know it's just a piece of wood, he said, suddenly nervous. But she kissed him, hard and sure and grateful. It's not just wood. It was home. Seasons passed. Spring brought wildflowers so thick they looked like spilled paint. The ranch thrived. The town softened. People stopped whispering, or maybe Mary Beth just stopped hearing them. She taught Ellie to braid rope and ride bareback. Sam took over feeding the hens. Joseph planted apple trees for shade. And one quiet autumn morning, a new cry filled the house. A girl, pink and furious and perfect. They named her Lena Grace. Lena, for Mary Beth's sister, the only person who had ever stood up for her before Joseph Grace for what they'd all been given, not the easy kind but the earned kind, the kind you fight for, the kind you become. Years later, long after the whispers had turned to stories, and the ranch had stretched across the horizon like something planted with purpose, a traveler passing through asked an old shopkeep about the Carter woman. You mean the one they left at the church? He asked. No, the shopkeep replied, a smile under his beard. You mean the one who built the ranch? The traveler looked confused. Same woman, the shopkeep said. But not the same story. They say the stars were out the night. She said yes. That he chose her in front of them all, with no apology, no shame. That she didn't become anyone new. She just finally stopped hiding who she was. And if you ever pass that way, you might see a hand-carved sign swinging in the breeze. And maybe, just maybe, if you look closely, you'll see a woman with a child on her hip, a man mending a fence beside her, and a fire that never went out, only waited for the wind to change. Now that you've heard her story, I'd love to know. What did it make you feel? Did something in her journey stay with you? Let me know in the comments. Your words mean more than you know.